What is going on, New York Giant fans? Welcome back to another video. Hit the like button, comment, subscribe to all the good stuff. Turn on post notifications so you know when a live stream pops or video drops. Appreciate y'all coming back. Also, share this out as well. So, for the second time this summer, we'll be doing a 53-man roster prediction for you guys. There are some players that have been cut already. Teams have gotten a head start on certain things. There's also been some trades out there, not involving the Giants, of course, other than the Isaiah Simmons thing, which we've already covered. But 53-man roster prediction, I did one, I believe, before the Lions preseason game, and now we're doing one post-Jets game. As I mentioned before, some players have already been cut, but those players were going to get cut anyways. The Brandon Bryants of the world, the Donovan Jeters, the Kevin Atkins. So there's still a lot of players as of this recording that have not been cut, and there's a lot of decisions still to be made by the New York Giants. But we got to get to the predictions, of course, offense, defense, special teams, and then cuts afterward. But we got to go into our sponsor. And for the first time in 3 long years and over 1.5K subs strong, we have an official sponsor, also known as SeatGeek, looking to go to a concert, a Giants game, a ball game in general. Now you can with our help. Get $20 off your entire order with the promo code Big Blue in the Bronx. It's Big Blue in the Bronx, nothing abbreviated, just the entire channel/podcast name. So without further ado, let's get into the offense and a couple of maneuvers here with the roster that I have predicted. So Daniel Jones and Tyrod Taylor is a QB. Even with the performance that Tommy DeVito has put on this preseason, I don't see them keeping 3 quarterbacks. Now, of course, there may be a time where they do that elevation type stuff and they say, okay, we're going to put Tommy DeVito on as the QB3, but I don't think that's going to be at any point earlier in the season unless Tyrod Taylor or Daniel Jones gets injured. Knock on wood, that does not happen. Running backs, I think the Giants only keep 3. They kept 3 last year. Saquon Barkley, Matt Breida, and Eric Gray. As you could probably predict, I don't have Jashaun Corbin making the roster. Now, I like Jashaun Corbin. I liked him coming out of college. I thought he could provide some real speed in the backfield. Eric Gray's not that athletic. Matt Breida is a shell of himself, but he's just a backup at this point. So I think Jashaun Corbin, in my personal opinion, I think he lands on an NFL team, whether it's a practice squad or the Giants practice squad or another active roster, because I definitely think he could be a running back 3 in this league. And he, despite what the stats showed for the Giants rushing game all summer, I personally think that he's got some good stuff in the rushing game. He makes the most of his opportunities, and also he's a good pass catcher out of the backfield. As for the wide receivers, Isaiah Hodgins, Sterling Shepard, Paris Campbell, Jalen Hyatt, Darius Slayton, Wan'Dale Robinson, Jamison Crowder. Again, there's going to be a couple of ones that you may scratch your head at or be just questionable about. Questionable about is definitely one to be, or I should say a state of mind to be when it comes to Wan'Dale Robinson, because we've gotten no update. They said about a week and a half ago, yeah, Wan'Dale Robinson is going to get practicing. So I think it's a situation of either the Giants, they hold him on the active roster on PUP like they are holding him now, and they just say, okay, you're out for the first 6 games, or they activate him and then declare him inactive for the first 3 games, which, of course, if you guys don't know, there's 7 inactives that have to be posted before every game. Now, Jamison Crowder, this one's an interesting one, and this was a late one of mine. I was deciding the wide receivers, and I'm like, you know what? I think Jamison Crowder will make the roster because Cole Beasley, he's been injured the last 2 games, and he was really impressing in camp to my surprise. But Jamison Crowder, he's a guy that could do some special team stuff. The Giants really don't have that other than a few guys, Eric Gray, who they're trying to pigeonhole into that role. But Crowder is a backup slot guy, could play some additional outside veteran body in that room. So I think Jamison Crowder makes the roster. Tight end is pretty self-explanatory until you get to number 3. Darren Waller, Daniel Bellinger. And yeah, you could say that it is self-explanatory that Lawrence Cager does make the roster, because it's not that he's been, oh my God, Darren Waller impressive, but he has been solid. It seems that the Giants favor him over the other guys. Chris Myrick got injured in the preseason game. Tommy Sweeney did not play because of the medical incident that happened at practice a couple of days ago. Ryan Jones is not really a guy that's going to make the roster either, so there's that. Moving to the offensive line room, of course, you got your starters. Thomas, Bredesen, Schmitz, Azudu, Glowinski, and Neal. And the three backups, I definitely predict the Giants will make some moves at the waiver wire. My honest eye is going on Dennis Kelly. If you guys don't know that name, he was with the Titans, he was with the Packers, with the Eagles a couple of years. He's a solid backup, right? He's better than Matt Parrott, some of the other guys we've seen. But I do think they try to keep Tyree Phillips. I think he is a valuable piece. And I think originally I didn't predict him to make the roster. Now that's changing for me because I think the Giants are a little desperate in terms of offensive line depth. And Tyree Phillips can play tackle and guard. Same thing goes with McKeithen. He can play tackle and guard, but obviously the Giants drafted him in the 5th round last year out of UNC. And then Sean Harlow, I think he eventually gets moved off the roster, but he is a solid veteran, below average to average backup in this league, drafted by the Falcons, played with the Cardinals as well. So defense and special teams, I think there could be some maneuvering also here as well. Let's start with the defensive line. 6 defensive linemen: Dexter Lawrence, Leonard Williams, Raheem Nunez-Roches, A'Shawn Robinson, Jordan Riley. DJ Davidson, he was activated off pup. He did not play against the New York Jets, so he could either be cut possibly, or they're just saving him and saying, okay, you're going to make the roster either way, but we're going to keep you out just for injury's sake, whatnot. You move to inside linebacker. Obviously, you have the new addition of Isaiah Simmons along with Okereke, Darian Beavers, Micah McFadden. Carter Coughlin played really, really well against the Jets, and I think he solidified his spot on special teams, but also as that inside linebacker 5, making a couple of nice plays versus the run, which is something that you wouldn't necessarily expect. He was an edge rusher coming out of college, but he's defended the run sometimes bad with tackling, sometimes good, and the good part came out against the Jets. So outside linebacker, this one's a toss-up, maybe for one spot. Kayvon Thibodeau, Azeez Ojulari, Tamon Fox, Tashawn Bauer, and Jahad Ward. Tashawn Bauer has played well this preseason, but I don't think he lasts on the second part of the 53. Now, if you guys don't remember, this is the initial 53 that is posted, and then they go to the waiver wire, and they start cutting guys, they start making trades. So this is the initial 53. I'm not counting other guys from other teams making the roster, because that will happen for the New York Giants, I bet. But Tashawn Bauer, I think if the Giants make an exterior move, Tashawn Bauer is going to be off the roster. But I do think he could be on the roster and just inactive on game day and used occasionally, or whatever the case may be, because Isaiah Simmons will also be included as an outside linebacker. But Tamon Fox, I think he's done well enough to make a roster spot, regardless of what I thought in the beginning. Jahad Ward is Jahad Ward. Cornerbacks, Jackson, Trey Hawkins, Deontay Banks, Cordell Flott, Aaron Robinson. I think they activate him off PUP. It is possible that I could be wrong in that scenario, and I could be wrong in a couple of different scenarios here, but I do think they activate Aaron Robinson because they've been talking praises for him in terms of coming off the PUP list, and if anything, you could just make him inactive. He's a solid guy that can play outside, he can play slot. The injuries are a worry. Going to Darnay Holmes, he did play a decent amount of snaps against the New York Jets, so that could mean a couple of different things, but I think the Giants really need the cornerback experience on the roster. I'm not saying Holmes should start. No, absolutely not. But I do think that after the showcases of Jamon Green, Rodarius Williams, Darren Evans, the showcase of those guys, you don't have faith in those guys. Those guys are going to be cut. So Darnay Holmes, until you maybe facilitate some sort of a trade, I think he makes the roster. Now, safeties, I think there could be some moves that are made in this room because as of right now, I have only 4 safeties making it. Now, of course, maybe Bobby McCain makes it again. I could be wrong in some of these, but 4 safeties: McKinney, Belton, Jason Pinnock, who has impressed in camp, and Javarius Owens, a 7th-round pick out of Houston. Got injured against the New York Jets, but I think he's going to make the roster. Let's go to the cuts so we could explain them. Tommy DeVito, I think he's going to be on the practice squad. I don't think he's going to be on the active roster. Maybe we'll talk about him in a separate video or a podcast or whatever because he really impressed during the preseason. I think he makes the practice squad as a QB3. I think the Giants will also try to stash Deshaun Corbin, but I think there is a higher chance this year rather than last year that he does get picked up by another team. As for Gary Brightwell, I put the asterisk next to his name because he is injured, and maybe they just revert him to IR and then cut him afterwards. He's got, I think, 2 years left on his contract, but you can't really make the roster, and this is hypocritical because Tyree Phillips has not played in a preseason game. You can't really try to make a roster if you're injured. That's going to be a couple of different guys that we talk about on here. So you have that. James Robinson, he's already been cut from the team, so that's an obvious. And I just originally thought that James Robinson was going to be cut, and he did have a good game against the Jets. Not going to sit there and lie to you, but that's not good enough to compare to the first 2 games where he was legitimately slow. Same thing could be said in camp. David Sills, I think he gets cut, but I think he may be brought back because of the connection with Daniel Jones. Jaden Mickens has already been cut. Khalil Pimpleton, as of this recording, has not been cut, but I don't think he makes it. Maybe he makes another practice squad or possibly the Giants as a punt returner or as a just backup slot wide receiver. Cole Beasley, in terms of him, once again, really impressed in camp. In terms of that, next 2 games he was injured, so you can't really make a roster that way, and I get it. Yes, the Giants were vying for him last year, but this year is a different year. The Giants, they have better wide receiver depth. I'm just going to say that right now. Colin Johnson was a guy that I originally predicted to make the roster. That has since changed. Didn't get much attention against the Jets. Didn't play against the Panthers. Played a tad, and when I say a tad, I mean a tad, against the Detroit Lions. And he just hasn't had the same impact he did last preseason where I would have had different thoughts. But I think Colin Johnson, they like the guy, but he has no reason to make this 53-man as a wide receiver. Bryce Ford Wheaton got injured. However, with that being said, I do think maybe they try to sneak him onto the practice squad. He didn't get much attention during the preseason, being that injuries kind of mixed in, and he's mostly a special teamer, but again, just not a lot of impact there. Chris Myrick got injured in the Jets game. I believe it was a concussion or some sort of injury for him, maybe a hand. So I don't think he makes the roster. I don't think he was going to make the roster either way. I think him or Tommy Sweeney, who I also list as a cut, I think one of those guys makes the practice squad as a fullback type guy that they mix in there if injury happens. Ryan Jones, I don't think he makes the roster. Maybe the practice squad, but again, I don't think so. Corey Cunningham, we know that first game, just bloody awful. Not been good, not reliable as a backup tackle. Jack Anderson was injured for 1.5 games, exited the Panthers game with an injury, and then did not play against the New York Jets. So I think the Giants have to look elsewhere in terms of depth. Julian Davenport looked horrible against the Jets. Shane Lemieux, I don't think he's going to make the roster. Matt Parrott has looked terrible all preseason, except for camp. Camp, he looked pretty good, but he's just been bloody awful. A lot of penalties, a lot of giving up sacks, not great in the running game. Wyatt Davis, we know the first game, he was not very good, gave up a couple of sacks. Next 2 games, pretty quiet, but then he also got injured. He said he has an ankle injury, so hopefully that's all that is for Wyatt Davis. However, I do not have him making the roster. You move on to the defensive line. Kevin Atkins has already been cut, basically a XFL guy. Ryder Anderson, I think they'll try to sneak him onto the practice squad, but he was a guy, once again, on the bubble that was, I can't say less favored, but if Tyree Phillips, I already predicted Tyree Phillips to make the roster. I think it was less of a chance for Ryder Anderson, being that there was more competition in his room rather than offensive tackle, where we just talked about Tyree Phillips. Kobe Smith, I think he's definitely a candidate to make the practice squad, not the active roster, because he played well. He had a quiet camp, but played really well in the preseason games. That's not going to be on the stat sheet, but I just saw with my eyes against the run, he made an impact. Donovan Jeter, not much of anything, maybe practice squad. Brandon Bryant, veteran, camp body, he's done, goodbye. Ray Wilborn didn't make too much of an impact versus the Jets and the Panthers. Cam Brown, this is a surprising one. I was trying to decide a couple of different guys, and I'm like, should I put Cam Brown on the roster? Should I not? I decided that Cam Brown is not going to make any of my predictions. Deontay Johnson really didn't have much of an impact. Javi Baldonado, he was a guy that I was huge on coming into camp. I think he's a guy that probably ends up on the practice squad. O'Shane Zimenez, goodbye, you're garbage. Amani Oruwariye, we could say the same thing. I mean, lackluster effort on the Alex Erickson touchdown. Also, not a good tackler, not good in coverage, pass interference a couple of times against the Jets. So he was. And listen, look, I don't hold his type of player like a backup or a failed starter to a high regard, but I honestly thought he was going to be a solid player coming into training camp. That did not work out. Jamon Green, multiple missed tackles. Zion Gilbert, I don't even see him making the practice squad. Darren Evans played decent, but a couple of bad plays against the Jets, not making the roster. He's already been cut, by the way. Bobby McCain, I think he unfortunately sabotaged his chances. He did have a concussion. It's not really his fault, to be honest, because I would have him making the roster if it wasn't for the injury. And the injury really wasn't his fault. Randall Cobb decided to lay out an unnecessary blindside block on him, which caused McCain's concussion. So I think he's out of a roster spot here. If he does pass through waivers, I do think the New York Giants will bring him back. Alex Cook, in terms of Alex Cook, he was a solid player during the preseason, but again, just not enough to make the roster. And then Nick McLeod, he was a roster bubble guy, and yeah, you could say, safety and corner, some of those positions, right? Not a ton of competition, a lot of just flabby play, especially in the corner room. But in the safety room, I think the Giants have enough guys to where they could collect somebody off of the waiver wire and say, okay, we're good enough. Maybe McLeod does make it. I don't know, but I just don't see him making it. Again, didn't play any of the preseason games. And then Cam Lyons, the backup long snappers. So tell me, guys, who do you think is going to make the roster? Who do you think is going to get cut? Who do you think is going to surprisingly make the roster? Who do you think the Giants should go after in the waiver wire? Let me know. We appreciate you guys as always, and we'll see you next time. Let's go, Big Blue.